Welcome back, my friends, to the Derate the Hate podcast. I am your host, Wilk of WilksWorld.com, and I am so incredibly grateful that you are taking the time to join me for another powerful DTH episode. Friends, at the Derate the Hate podcast, it's all about bettering the world one attitude at a time. See, we did not create the hate, but with your help, we can derate the hate. That all starts with gratitude and personal accountability. We cannot control everything that happens to us in life, but we can control how we react to it. How we act, how we react, no matter what happens to us, how we react to it makes the difference. Friends, there is only one good thing about a bad attitude, and that is that we have the ability as individuals to change it. Here on the DTH podcast, we strive to bring you great guests and provide tools to do just that. Please be sure to share it with your friends. Subscribe if you haven't done so. Ratings and feedback are always greatly appreciated. And with that, let's get to this week's episode. I have said it before and I will say it again. Nothing good comes of hate. I am reminded of this daily in so many of the things that I see in the world in which we live today. But it was so clear to me in the speech that I saw the President of the United States give the other day. Now, I just want to make this very clear. The Derate the Hate podcast is not political. I do not want it to be political. There are just so many other shows out there for that, and they can keep it. But that doesn't change the fact that I do have an opinion, and hate is hate, and I will call out hate when I see hate. When labels are placed on large groups of people, and then that label or those people are then classified as a threat, bad things are bound to happen. When I heard the things that I heard coming from the President of the United States the other day, I was astounded because I know a lot of these people that he was referring to. I'm a working class guy. I spend a lot of times out in factories and machine shops and talking to everyday working class Americans, and a lot of those people are those people that he was referring to as ultra MAGA extremists and MAGA Republicans. And the reality is, they are not the evil, extremist, and threat types of people that he makes them out to be. But that's beside the point. The reality is this. No matter what you're talking about, when people are labeled and people are classified as a threat and people are classified as evil, as he tried to make out, bad things are bound to happen. It's the same thing with racism. It's the same thing with any time somebody tries to put a label on certain people and make things something that they are not. Racism is evil. Classifying people as ultra mega extremists is evil. And this brought to mind for me this week a conversation that I had with my friend Daryl Davis. And that is a conversation that I am going to replay today. How can you hate me when you don't even know me? Such an important conversation. I hope you'll take the time to listen. So important. Daryl Davis is a living legend, and he has got so much great information to pass along to you, the DTH listeners. I promise you it's time well spent. Here we go. Daryl Davis, thank you for joining the Derate the Hate podcast. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time.
It's totally my pleasure, Will. Thank you for having me.
So good to see you, man. So good to see you. You know, I spoke with Jeff Scoop back I was back on episode 70, so probably about 6-7 months ago. And he talked about you. He had some phenomenal things to say about you and how you were instrumental in changing his life around, changing the way he thought about things, stepping back from white supremacy and the Nazi movement. Daryl, talk to me a little bit about how you got started doing what you do, because by all rights, you're changing the hearts and minds of people who a lot of people don't even know that have hearts and minds.
Well, Jeff Scoop is my brother, man. I love that guy, and I love all the work that he's doing right now. I mean, he's doing some absolutely phenomenal things. It's one thing to be a leader. When you've risen from the rank and file to the top position in any movement, whether it's white supremacy, whether it's the president of the United States, whatever it is, you've been through the paces to get there. and you've had a lot of power and a lot of followers under you. And then when you come forward and tell your followers, I've been wrong. I'm wrong for what I was doing, and I led you all astray. And now I need to fix this and correct the things that I've done, and hopefully you will follow me into this new endeavor as well. Mm-hmm. That is very powerful, and my brother Jeff is doing just that.
That's phenomenally.
I'm very happy for that. In terms of me, I had a different experience than most Black Americans, and I can go ahead and say most white Americans as well. As a child, I'll be 64 later this month. As a child, at the age of 3, I began traveling around the world. My parents were in the U.S. Foreign Service, so I grew up as an American Embassy kid. And how it works is you get assigned to a country by the U.S. State Department. You're there for 2 years. You come back home here to the States. You're here for maybe a few months or a year if you request it. And then you're back overseas again for another 2 years. So back and forth every 2 years. I started at the age of 3 in 1961. I was born in 58. So my first exposure to school was overseas. Okay. I did kindergarten, first grade, third grade, fifth grade, seventh grade, all overseas. Now, this is in the 1960s, right? My classrooms over there were full of kids from all over the world. My classmates were from Nigeria, Japan, Russia, Czechoslovakia, France, Germany, Sweden, Australia. If any of those countries had an embassy where we were assigned, all of their kids went to the same school. So that being my first exposure to school, that became my norm. That's what I thought school was, right? Mm-hmm. So that was my baseline. But every time I come back home after my dad's assignment back here to the U.S., I would either be in all Black schools or Black and white schools, meaning the still segregated or the newly integrated. And see, just because desegregation was passed by the Supreme Court in 1954, 4 years before I was born, it didn't mean that integration happened overnight. It took years and years, right? On into the 60s, in some cases, even the 70s before some schools got integrated. So one time, when I came back, I couldn't understand this separation stuff. But one time when I came back, I was age 10, and I was in the 4th grade, 1968. And I was back home here in the States. And I was one of 2 Black kids in the entire school, myself in 4th grade, a little Black girl in 2nd grade. So consequently, all of my friends were 4th and 5th graders, the older people. Sure. And they all were white. Many of my male friends were members of the Cub Scouts, and they invited me to join. So I joined. And, we had a good time, no problems. And then one day we had a parade, and I was the only Black participant in this parade. The streets were blocked off. Sidewalks were lined with nothing but white people. And they were waving and cheering, having a good time, until we got to one point in this parade when suddenly I was getting hit with bottles and soda pop cans and debris from the street. But
unbelievable.
I didn't know what was happening. I didn't believe it either. But, it's just a small group of people mixed in with a larger crowd. Sure. 4 or 5 people. I remember there being 2 kids, maybe a year or 2 older than me, and a couple of adults who were throwing things. It wasn't everybody. And I figured, these are these kids and their parents. But the thing of it was I thought when this happened to me, I thought these people over here on the sidewalk, they didn't like the Scouts. That's how naive I was, right?
Oh, sure.
I was the only Scout getting hit, man, until my den mother, my Cub master, my troop leader all came running over and covered me with their bodies. And these are white people too, and escorted me out of the danger. And I kept saying, what did I do? I didn't do anything to them. Why are they doing this? And all they would do is kind of shush me and rush me along, telling me to keep moving, everything would be okay. So they never answered me as to why this was happening. And I saw that none of my other Scouts were getting this special protection. So now I'm trying to figure out, what did I do? I didn't do anything. I'm just marching with my Scouts. It never occurred to me why this happened, because I'd never had.
And why would it? Why would it? I mean,
exactly, because I've been around people from all over the world, and this never happened, right? So when I got home at the end of the day, my mother and father, who were not present at the parade, were cleaning me up and putting Band-Aids on me and asking me, how did you fall down and get all scraped up? And I explained to them, no, I didn't trip and fall down. I told them what had happened. And for the first time in my life, my mom and dad sat me down and explained to me what racism was, believe it or not, at the age of 10, I had never even heard the word racism.
Nice.
Because it didn't exist in my world, So there's no reason for me to know about it. And when they told me this, I didn't believe them because my 10-year-old brain could not process the idea that somebody who didn't know me would want to hurt me just because of the color of my skin. It made no sense to me. And furthermore, to even enforce my belief that this was a lie that my parents were telling me was the fact that the people over here on the sidewalk doing this to me did not look any different than my friends that I was marching with, or my foreign friends, my little friends overseas from France or from Sweden or Denmark or wherever. They looked the same, and they didn't do this to me, so it had nothing to do with skin color. My parents were making this up, so I didn't believe them. Well, within 2 months of that incident, 1968, on April the 4th, Martin Luther King was assassinated, and I remember it very clearly. Every major city in this country, where I am right now, right near Washington, D.C., where I was at the time, Boston, Massachusetts, where I'm from originally, Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, they all burned to the ground in the name of this new word I had learned a couple months back called racism. And,
you've got a crash course.
Yeah, exactly, man, firsthand. Yeah. And at that point, I realized my parents had told me the truth. This strange phenomenon thing called racism does exist. But what I didn't know was why. Why does it exist? Why do people hate one another? I couldn't understand that. So I formed a question in my mind at that age, at age 10, which was, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? And so now for almost the next 54 years, I've been looking for the answer to that question. Moving along, I went to high school, graduated high school, went to college, graduated college. I have my degree in music. So I'm a full-time musician. Now, my childhood experiences took me around the world. Today, as a professional musician and lecturer, I'm once again traveling around the world, performing or speaking. When you take my childhood experiences, my childhood travels, and combine them to my adulthood travels, I have now been in a total of 61 countries on 6 continents. I've performed and lectured in all 50 states. So all that is to say is that I have been exposed to a multitude of skin colors, ethnicities, cultures, beliefs, religions, ideologies, etc. And all of that has helped shape who I've become. And in fact, to just capsule it, my favorite quote of all time is by Mark Twain, and it's called the travel quote. Mm-hmm. And Mark Twain said, "Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime." And that is so true. Yeah. And, now listen, all that travel does not make me a better human being than anybody else. Okay. But what it does is it's given me a better and broader perspective of humanity. All right. Yep. So I don't have to guess what somebody's like. I've experienced people. All right. So I try to bring that with me, to share with people vicariously. And one thing that I've learned, I've been doing this now for about 40 years. I've been traveling a lot longer, of course, but doing this work with white supremacists and other people for almost 40 years. What I've learned is this: no matter how far I've traveled from my own country, the U.S., whether it's right next door to Canada or right next door to Mexico or halfway around the globe, no matter how different the people may be that I meet, they don't look like me, they don't speak my language, they don't worship as I do, I always conclude one thing, that we all are human beings. And as such, we all want these 5 core values in our lives. We all want to be loved. We all want to be respected. We all want to be treated fairly. We all want to be heard. And we all want the same things for our family as anybody else wants for their family. And if we can learn to apply those 5 core values, and when we find ourselves in an adversarial situation, or we find ourselves in a culture or society in which we're unfamiliar, I can guarantee that our navigation will be much more smooth and much more positive, And so that's what I bring to the table when I'm dealing with people with whom I may not agree. I don't have to agree with you, but we can get along. We can communicate. And it's important for me to learn about you, and it's important for you to learn about me. Because we do live in this country together. As a Black person, yeah, my roots are in Africa. As a white person, yeah, your roots are in Europe. And if you want to go back further than that, your roots are in Africa too. Okay, exactly. But let's put it this way: your immediate ancestors came from Europe over here, all right, and mine came from Africa as a descendant of slaves.
Sure.
I'm not going back to Africa any sooner than you're going back to Europe. So
Right.
We have to live here together. And so it's important for us to know each other. And so when this incident happened to me and I formed that question, how can you hate me if you don't even know me? I wanted to know answers. And as a teenager and through my adulthood, I began buying books on Black supremacy, white supremacy, the Nazis in Germany, the neo-Nazis over here, the Ku Klux Klan, anti-Semitism, racism. I have a vast library on it. And I've read all these books. All these books talked about the issue, but they didn't give me an answer that was satisfactory to me as to why it happens. And when I would ask people, why are people like that? And they would say, oh, well, Daryl, some people are just like that. That's just the way it is. Well, that's not a good enough answer for me.
It's not a good answer. It's not a good answer at all.
No. After college, country music had made a resurgence. And, if you want to work full-time as a musician, you joined a country band. I like country music, and it's easy for me to play. So I joined this country band. It was an all-white country band. I was the only Black guy in the band, and usually the only Black guy where we would play. And the band was pretty popular here in Maryland, where I am right now. And so they had played this place called the Silver Dollar Lounge in a town called Frederick, Maryland, right out about an hour and 20 minutes outside of Washington, D.C. And so the Silver Dollar Lounge had a reputation of being an all-white lounge.
Okay.
And, yeah, there were no signs, that said, no Blacks allowed or whites only, nothing like that. Like you saw on the old water fountains and restrooms and stuff, nothing like that. But it had that vibe, you don't go there if you're Black and you're not welcome. And, when you try to go somewhere where you're not welcome and alcohol is being served, it's not a good combination, bro.
Right.
So, right.
Get a little sporty in there, I suppose.
Yeah, man. So here I was in the Silver Dollar Lounge. And like I said, the band had played there before, my first time. So everything was fine. We're playing, people are dancing, having a good time. So after the first set, we take a break. I'm following the band over to the band table. And as I'm walking behind them, I felt somebody from behind put their arm around my shoulder. Now, I don't know anybody in this joint, right? And I see the whole band ahead of me. So I'm turning around trying to see who's touching me because I knew the reputation. And I'm thinking, oh, man, something about getting ready to hit the fan or what? I turn around. It's this white guy who's older than me, 15, 18 years older than me. Big smile on his face. He's happy. He says, hey, man, I really enjoy your all's music. I said, thank you. And I shook his hand. And he points at the stage and says, I've seen this here band before, but I ain't never seen you. Where'd you come from? And I explained that I had just joined the band a couple months back. This is my first time. He goes, man, I sure like your piano playing. This is the first time I ever heard a Black man play piano like Jerry Lee Lewis. And so I'm thinking, I was not offended, but I'm thinking, this guy is older than me. How come he doesn't know?
How would he not know?
Yeah, of Jerry Lee's style. So I said, well, Jerry Lee got it from the same place I did, from Black blues and boogie-woogie piano players. That's where rock and roll and rockabilly evolved.
Exactly.
I never heard no Black man play like that except for you. Something, okay, well, this guy never saw Little Richard or Fats Domino, same style. And I said, listen, man, I know Jerry Lee. He's a good friend of mine. He's told me himself where he learned how to play. The guy didn't believe I knew Jerry Lee either. But he was so fascinated that he invited me back to his table. He wanted to buy me a drink. I don't drink alcohol, but, I said I'd have a cranberry juice. So he pays the waitress for my cranberry juice. Then he takes his glass and he clinks my glass and cheers me. And then he says, this is the first time I ever sat down and had a drink with a Black man. And now I'm totally baffled. Yeah. Right. I'm wondering, well, how can this be? Because at that point, I'm not stupid, but I was naive. And at that point in my life, I had sat down with literally thousands of white people or anybody else and had a meal, a beverage, a conversation. This guy is at least a decade and a half older than me. He never sat down with a black guy before. Come on. So innocently, I asked him, I said, why? And he stared down at the tabletop, didn't answer me. I asked him again. And his buddy sitting next to him said, tell him. I said, tell me. He looked back at me just as plain as day. And he said, I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan. And I started laughing because now I didn't believe him.
Right.
I know a lot about the Klan. I just told you I bought all these books and stuff. And in none of my books does it talk about how a Klansman will come up and embrace a black guy and want to hang out with him and buy him a drink and, praise his talent and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't work.
Because at this point, you're probably still made to believe that they're monsters.
Right.
And so it's got to be clicking at this point, Daryl. It's all ignorance. It's just ignorance. They've never.
I didn't believe he was a Klansman. I'm laughing. I'm thinking, why would he tell me something stupid like that? He's not a damn Klansman,
Right.
And then I'm trying to justify what he said, and I knew he didn't believe me about Jerry Lee. That Jerry Lee learned anything from black people, and B, that I knew Jerry Lee, both of which are true. So I figured, okay, he doesn't believe me about Jerry Lee. He thinks I'm jerking him around about Jerry Lee, so he's going to jerk me around about being in the Klan. That's what I'm thinking, right? And so while I'm laughing, he goes inside his pocket, flips through his wallet, and produces his Klan membership card, and he hands it to me.
Oh my goodness!
And I was like, whoa. I recognize the Klan emblem, the Mayoke, the red circle with the white cross and red blood drop in the center.
Sure.
Like, whoa, this thing is for real, man. It wasn't funny anymore, right? So I stopped laughing and I gave it back to him. And we talked about the Klan, different things. This guy was super friendly. He was very fascinated by me. I was a novelty for him. He gave me his phone number, wanted me to call him whenever I was to return to this bar with this band, because he wanted to invite his friends, meaning Klansmen and Klanswomen, to see, as he put it, the black guy who plays like Jerry Lee. I'm not sure he called me the black guy when he's talking to his friends, but whatever. That's what he wanted. He was fast. He wanted to share me with his friends. So I said, okay, I'll call you. So I called him every 6 weeks, but the band got on a rotation basis with other bands. Every 6 weeks, we were there for the weekend. And I called him on a Wednesday or Thursday and said, hey, man, we're going to be down at the Silver Dollar. Come on out. He'd come out both nights, Friday and Saturday night, bring his friends. And, they didn't come in robes and hoods. They came in regular street clothes. And Sure. They would gather around the stage, watch me play with the band. And then they'd get out on the dance floor and dance to our country music. And on the breaks, I would make my way over to his table to say hello. Some of the Klan people were curious about me. They wanted to meet me and talk to me. And I would sit there and talk with them as well. A couple of them, though, when they see me coming, they're like, get up and move over to the other side of the room. Sure, so it's like, no, we don't want to see, we don't want to touch you. We don't want to talk to you. We just want to observe you, which is cool. So this went on until the end of that year. And then I quit that band and I went back to playing rock and roll and blues and R&B and whatever else. A couple of years later, it dawned on me, Daryl, you blew it. The answer to your question that's been plaguing you since the age of 10, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? It fell right into your lap and you didn't even realize it. Because who better to ask that question of than somebody who would go so far as to join an organization that has over 100-year history of practicing hating people who don't look like them, who don't believe as they believe. Get back in touch with that Klansman up there in Frederick, and get him to hook you up with the state leader, which is known as a Grand Dragon, which we would call a governor, and interview that Grand Dragon, and then travel around the country, interview other Klan leaders, state leaders, imperial wizards, national leaders, and just regular membership, and write a book about it. Because all the books that have been written about the Ku Klux Klan were written by white authors. Mine would be the first book written by a Black author from the perspective of sitting down face to face with a Klan member and interviewing them.
Yes.
I decided that's what I'm going to do. So moving ahead, I got back in touch with that Klansman. He did not want to fix me up with the Grand Dragon from Maryland. He was terrified that if he were to bring a black guy to this guy, that we both would be in trouble.
Sure, and, I suppose, yep.
Yeah, so I said, look, give me the guy's phone number and address, and I will, make the arrangements. And he didn't want to do that either. And I begged and pleaded. So finally he did it. on the condition that I not tell this Grand Dragon where I got his personal information. I said, okay, fine. And then the Grand Dragon's name was Roger Kelly. And he warned me. He said, Daryl, do not fool with Roger Kelly. Roger Kelly will kill you. And I'm like, well, that's the whole reason I need to see this guy. I don't understand that mentality. That's what I'm trying to find out. What makes him want to do a thing like that when he doesn't even know me? All he sees is my skin color. Daryl, just don't fool with the guy, I said, okay. I said, I'll be careful. And this guy genuinely liked me, and he was trying to protect me. And he had since left the Klan. He had told me that he had quit, but I later found out he got kicked out. And that's a funny story in itself, which I'll tell you later.
Okay.
But, it's hilarious. But anyway, I thanked him. And so moving ahead, I had my secretary. My secretary was white. And I only mentioned that not because I care. I could care less what color somebody's skin is, but it's important to this story. I had the phone number, and I could have called Mr. Kelly myself. But I figured, you know what? If I call him, he might pick up in my voice that I'm Black and say, I'm not talking to you, click. And then my whole project would have ended before it ever got started, right?
Oh,
so
sure.
So if Mary called him, he would know that the other voice on the end of the line was a white woman. You can tell by her voice. And he would not automatically assume that this white woman was working for a Black man, especially a Black man who's writing a book on the Klan, because they didn't exist. So that might up my chances of him agreeing to do the thing. And I told her specifically, do not tell Mr. Kelly that I'm Black. If he asks, don't lie to him, but don't give him reason to ask. So she said, okay. So she called, and I figured, I want him to see me face to face, and then he can decide if he wants to turn around and walk away, or if he's going to, attack me, or if he's going to sit down and do the interview. But I want him to see me first. And another reason why I didn't want him to know in advance was that even if he agreed to the interview, knowing that I was Black, he might have different answers for a Black interviewer than he would have for a white interviewer if he had time to prepare. So I wanted it to be candid, spontaneous. So she understood. She called him. He did not ask what color I was, and he agreed to do the interview. So we set it up for the motel. The Silver Dollar Lounge is in the basement, the ground floor of the sub-ground floor of this motel, Truck Stop Motel up in Frederick. And Silver Dollar Lounge, the building is still there, but it's closed down. Mm-hmm. Somebody got murdered there some years ago, and they just shut down the lounge.
Yeah, it ruins the reputation of a place pretty quick.
Yeah, I'm glad I wasn't there that night. So, it might have been me, right? So anyway, but the motel still operates. Anyway, so we got this room in the motel, and the time was set for a Sunday afternoon at 5:15. So Mary and I got there super early, and I gave her some money to go down the hall and get soda pop out of the vending machine, put it in the ice bucket, get it all cold, because I had no idea what Mr. Kelly was going to do when he arrived. Would he come in and do the interview? Would he see me and say he's not talking to me and walk away? Would he try to fight me? I don't know. But I knew what I was going to do. I was going to be hospitable and offer him a cold beverage. So she got the soda, put it in the ice bucket, set it on the dresser. And I took the lamp table and removed the lamp and set it in the most obscure corner of the room. And I put a chair on one side for Mr. Kelly and a chair on the other side for me. And beside my chair, I had a black canvas bag that contained a recorder, which I set on the cassette recorder, which I set in the middle of the table, all in hopes that if he did come in the room, that he would agree to allow me to record. And I had some blank cassettes, and I had a copy of the Bible, because the Ku Klux Klan claims to be a Christian organization. And they claim that the Bible preaches racial separation. Now, I've never seen that in the Bible, and I've read the Bible.
Neither have I.
Yeah, so I want to be able, to reach down, pull out my Bible and say, here, Mr. Kelly, please show me chapter and verse where it says that Blacks and whites must be separate. So I'm all prepared, right? Right on time, right to the minute. There's a knock on the door, and now you cannot see who's in the room, even if the door is open and you're standing in the hallway, because you have to come in the room and go around the corner, and then you see the room. So I'm seated back there where you can't see me. So knock on the door, Mary hops up, runs around the corner, opens the door. In walks what is known as the Grand Nighthawk. Nighthawk in Klan terminology means security, bodyguard. So a Grand Nighthawk would be the bodyguard to the Grand Dragon, the state leader. whereby,
Okay.
an Imperial Nighthawk would be the bodyguard to the Imperial Wizard, the national leader. So in walks this Grand Nighthawk. He's wearing military fatigues. The Ku Klux Klan emblem, that red circle, white cross, blood drop patch right here, the letters KKK on this side, embroidered on his cap, it said Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And on his hip, he had a semi-automatic handgun inside a holster. And so he comes in and he turns the corner and he sees me and just freezes. Now, Mr. Kelly is on the other side of the wall, and he does not realize that his Nighthawk had stopped short. So Mr. Kelly came around the corner and boom, hit that guy in the back and knocked him forward because he didn't realize the guy had stopped. And so now they're stumbling around trying to regain their balance, and they're like looking all around the room, and I'm just sitting there at the table, like looking at them, and I could read their faces. There's a lot of apprehension. I knew what they were thinking. They were thinking, did the receptionist give us the wrong room number? Or is this an ambush?
I was going to say, is this an ambush?
Yeah, exactly.
Is this some type of a prank? What the hell is going on here?
So I saw all that. So I stood up and I went like this to show my palms that I had nothing in my hands.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked forward and I said, "Hi, Mr. Kelly, I'm Darrell Davis." And he shook my hand, as did the Nighthawk. So far, so good. I said, "Please, Mr. Kelly, come on in. Please have a seat." He sat down. The Nighthawk stood at attention, rigid, right to his right. And before I could sit down, he asked me for some identification, which I gave him. And then, I took my seat, and we began this interview. And every time he would make some biblical reference to justify something that he told me, that I questioned, I would reach down to get my Bible to hand it to him to point out chapter and verse. Or if my cassette ran out of tape, I'd reach down to get a fresh tape. Every time I reached down like this into my bag, the Nighthawk would reach up like this to his holster.
Sure,
yeah.
Sure.
And I understood that, that's his job. I'm the enemy. And he has no idea what's in my bag. So he's doing his job. His job is to protect himself and protect his boss. So I got that, and I didn't worry too much about it. So this went on, for about 45 minutes or so. And then the Nighthawk relaxed. He realized there was no threat in the bag. I went in and out of the bag. He didn't move. A little over an hour into this conversation, Mr. Kelly and I just talking casually back and forth. And out of nowhere, there was a very short, fast noise, like a that was it. And there was no reason for this noise. It came out of nowhere. But I knew that Mr. Kelly had made that noise. How did I know that? Because I didn't do it. So if I didn't do it, I'm going to blame it on somebody else, right? That's human nature. Mm-hmm. So because the noise was so short and so fast, my ear did not have time to discern what it was. So automatically, I perceived it as being an ominous, threatening noise. I mean, after all, I'm a Black guy. I'm sitting in a room with the head of the Klan. I've already been told, Darrell, don't fool with Roger Kelly. He'll kill you. So I got all that running in my head, right? Mm-hmm. And at that very split second, I jumped up out of my chair and I hit the table. I'm getting ready to come across that table. I had gone into what you call survival mode. When you fear for your life, you go into survival mode. You're going to do whatever you got to do to survive. And there are normally about 4 things you can do in survival mode. Some people, they pass out, they faint. Yep. Because the fear is so great, the brain cannot process it, and the brain shuts down, and you faint. Mm-hmm. I don't do that. Another thing people will do, their body will start shaking, their muscles will start constricting, and they curl up into a little ball. And you can be punching them, kicking them. They won't even be trying to deflect the blows. That's called paralysis by fear. You've seen people, get into a fight and they curl up into a fetal position and they don't even try to defend.
Yep.
Paralysis by fear. They can't move. I don't do that either. Third thing people will do is to run away. That is your best option. As quickly as you can, separate yourself from the source of the fear. Get away from it, right? And that is the option that I would have chosen had it been available to me. But it was not available because I knew I cannot outrun a bullet in a motel room. Okay?
Yeah, no, it's pretty tough. It's pretty tough.
Yeah, I'm not Superman or the Flash or whoever, so that was not an option. I was not armed. My secretary was not armed. The only person that I knew for sure who was armed was the Nighthawk. I could see his weapon in his holster. I did not know if Mr. Kelly had a weapon up. He was wearing a suit, suit and tie. I didn't know if he had a weapon up under his suit jacket or not. All I knew was I cannot run a bullet in a motel room, right? So your fourth option is to do what's called a preemptive strike. Get them before they get you. And that's what I was on my way to do. When I came up out of my chair, I was about to dive across that table, grab the Nighthawk, grab Mr. Kelly, and slam them down to the ground and disarm the Nighthawk, neutralize the situation. And so when I hit the table, I'm just inches from Mr. Kelly's face. And I'm looking right into his eyes because I knew he had done this. I didn't say one word. I'm looking right in his eyes, and my eyes were speaking loud and clear to him. In fact, my eyes were shouting so loud he could hear my eyes. My eyes were saying to him, "What did you just do?" Well, ironically, his eyes were fixated on my eyes. And I could read his eyes. He didn't say a word either. I could read his eyes like ESP, like telepathy. His eyes were saying to me, "What did you just do?" And the Nighthawk had his hand on his gun, looking back and forth between both of us, like, what did either one of y'all just do? Well, Mary was sitting on top of the dresser because there were no more chairs in the room. And she realized what had happened. And she began explaining it to us. And it happened again, and we all started laughing. What had happened was the ice in the ice bucket had begun melting, and the cans of soda were shifting down the ice.
Oh, geez.
That was it. That was it, okay? And we all began laughing. But this was a teaching moment. I won't say it was a learning moment. The learning would come later, but it was a teaching moment. And what we learned was we all are human beings. We each, even though we're on opposite ends of the spectrum, ideologically, right? We each felt fear over the same thing, fear of the unknown. The unknown means that of which we are ignorant. When you're ignorant, there's something you're ignorant about, something you don't know about, right? We felt fear of the unknown. That means we both were human beings, regardless of what our ideological beliefs were. That's a human emotion. And then when the fear was addressed, we felt relief. And we all began laughing. It's crazy. A Black man and a Klan leader sitting together in a room at a table, laughing at the same thing.
And what year was this, Daryl? What year was this?
This was 1990.
Okay,
1990. And so we're laughing. And then everything was cool. I went in and out of the bag. Nobody jumped. The ice kept making the noise, and we laughed, and we carried on and talked some more. So the lesson learned here is this: all because some foreign, and an underscore circle highlight the word foreign entity of which we were ignorant, that being the bucket of ice, cans of soda. I mean, we knew about it. Because we knew about it over there, but we'd long forgotten about it because we're so focused on our conversation. It was, no longer in our little mindset, right? All because some foreign entity, being the bucket of ice, cans of soda, entered into our little comfort zone via the noise that it made. We became fearful and accusatory of each other. So the lesson taught is this: ignorance breeds fear. We fear those things of which we're ignorant. Now, if you do not address that fear in turn will escalate and breed hatred.
Yep.
Because we hate the things that frighten us. If you don't address the hatred and mitigate the hatred in turn will escalate into anger and breed destruction. We want to destroy the things that we hate. Why? Because they frighten us. But guess what? They may have been harmless, and we were simply ignorant. So we saw the whole chain almost unfold to completion. Completion would have been the last component, destruction. Had I pounced across the table and hurt one of them, or had the Nighthawk drawn his gun and shot me or my secretary. I'm doing my job to preserve my life and her life. He's doing his job to preserve his life and his grand dragon's life. Okay? Mm-hmm. It stopped just short of that, fortunately. Yep. But you are aware, and you saw exactly what I'm talking about, all the way from beginning to completion, almost 5 years ago, on August 12th, 2017, 2 hours from where I'm sitting right now, in a town called Charlottesville, Virginia, where they had White Supremacists Unite the Right rally. And I know all those guys that put on that rally. I know them all personally, all right? Crazy rally, bad thing.
Yep.
On that day, August 12th, 2017, there was a lot of ignorance in Charlottesville. There was a lot of fear in Charlottesville. There was a lot of hatred in Charlottesville. And what did it culminate in? It culminated in destruction when a white supremacist got inside his vehicle and attempted to murder as many counter-protesters as he could by driving his car full force, full speed into the crowd. He succeeded in injuring over 24 people and murdering one young lady named Heather Heyer. Ignorance breeds fear, fear breeds hatred, hatred breeds destruction. Now, that, I'm talking about adults right now, but that is a normal thing. Even children, that applies to them as well, okay? Because sometimes, I lecture to middle schools. Of course, I tone down the lecture, but, as opposed to college or corporations, et cetera. But, I'll be lecturing to some middle school class, right? And they'll be sitting at their little desks, 5, 6 rows back, and I'm standing up in front of the class, and I'm talking casually like I am right now. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, I'll point and I'll scream, "Hey, there's a snake under your chair." And I'll point to somebody in the front row. Just at my suggestion that there is a snake under somebody's chair in the front row, everybody from the front row all the way to the back of the room in the 5th or 6th row throw their legs up in the air and scream. All right?
Right.
And then they realize, there's no snake there. And we all began laughing. And I say to them, why'd you all scream? And then you'll hear things like, "I hate snakes. I'm afraid of snakes." There's your fear. There's your hatred. Well, why do you hate snakes? Why are you afraid of snakes? Because they're slimy. They're poisonous. There's your ignorance. If you ever touch the snake, it's not slimy. It's dry. All right.
Exactly. Yep.
And not all snakes are poisonous. So there's your ignorance. Ignorance causes fear, which causes hatred. Then I say to them, okay, well, obviously, there's no snake under your chair or under anybody's chair. I'm just making a joke. But let's just say that there really was a snake under your chair and I was pointing it out. What would you all want me to do about it? You know what they say?
Kill it. Yep.
There's your destruction right there.
Exactly.
And these are kids. Middle school, right? We're talking, preteen. So there is your destruction.
Ignorance, human nature,
fear. Yeah, ignorance breeds fear, fear breeds hatred, hatred breeds destruction. Now, here's where we go wrong as adults. We spend way too much time in this country talking about the other person or talking at the other person or talking past the other person. Why don't we spend just a little bit of time talking with the other person?
I talk about it all the time on the podcast.
Exactly, and I'm a firm believer that a missed opportunity for dialogue is a missed opportunity for conflict resolution. Nothing gets resolved unless you talk about it, Otherwise, right. If you don't have the information about me and I don't have the information about you, all we can do is speculate about one another. And we probably get it wrong. But then when we start talking, oh, I get you now. I understand what you're saying. You like that too? I didn't know that. And we're finding commonalities. We may not agree on everything, but at least we can develop a relationship. Okay.
Exactly. We don't need to agree on everything. I mean, there's probably a lot you and I would disagree upon.
Sure. So we need to spend some time talking with each other.
Yep.
That's number one. Number two, we are addressing this problem ass backwards. Okay. We're doing it from a top down. And top down works in certain situations. When you're dealing with corporations, departments, companies, things like that, you want to address the management, the administration at the top, because everything trickles down to the people down below. Like, say, a police department. If the management, the colonels and chiefs and all those people up there in the brass, if they're loose, all their officers down on the street are going to be loose.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. It trickles down. If they're tight upstairs, they're going to tighten up downstairs. All right.
Yep.
Same thing with a department, a department store or a corporation. Management is loose. The floor workers are loose. Mm-hmm. Management is tight. The floor workers are tight. All right. That works in that regard. But in this regard, it can't be a top down unless you're dealing with institutions and things and, systemic things like that. But when you're dealing with individuals, it has to be a bottom up.
Yep.
What we do is we spend way too much time in this country worrying about the destruction, trying to address the destruction. All right. The World Trade Center is not coming back. It's been destroyed. Okay. It's gone. George Floyd is not coming back. He's been destroyed. I'm not saying forget about him, or disavow him. No, none of that. Remember him and all that, and pay tribute and whatever you want to do. But what's destroyed is not coming back. Don't spend a lot of time on the destruction. That is a byproduct of the nucleus, a symptom. Forget about the destruction. Forget about the hatred.
Yep.
Say, what are we going to do about all this hate? Stop addressing the hate. Forget about it, okay? It is a byproduct, a symptom. Forget about the fear. That's another byproduct, all right? If you cure the nucleus, the root cause, which is ignorance, if you cure ignorance, then there's nothing to fear, because we fear that of which we're ignorant. So if you cure ignorance, there's nothing to fear. With nothing to fear, there's nothing to hate. With nothing to hate, there's nothing to get mad about and destroy. The good thing is there is a cure for ignorance. That cure is called education and exposure. And that is where we should devote our money, our efforts, our energy, and our time to bringing education and exposure to alleviate that ignorance. We can do that.
I couldn't agree with you more. Daryl.
Okay, exactly. That's what we need to focus on. Forget about focusing on the symptoms. I mean, if cancer is your root cause, you can't put a Band-Aid on top of it. You got to go down to the bone where it is and hit it with that radiation or that chemo or whatever. Just putting up some kind of topical cream is not drilling down to the root cause. Right?
Well, I think, and I think a lot of times what happens, Daryl, is people, just like you're talking about, they focus on what the end result was, the destruction, and then they try to make up some narrative, and then try to they go into the correlation and causation kind of thing, and they turn it into, well, the people in power oftentimes turn it into something that further divides us, which actually makes things worse instead of making things better. They don't, just like you're talking about, they don't go for the nucleus, they don't go for the root cause of it and try to educate and bring us together. They use that destruction as a means of keeping us apart.
Exactly. And fear is a great tool for that. Yeah. Fear is a great tool for that. While we're busy fighting each other because they've divided us, they're raking in millions and whatever else they're doing. Our attention is off of them and supporting them because they're going to be our protectors. They don't look at the history, or if they know the history, they don't share it with us. They see the end result, and then they write their own narrative as to how this happened and what needs to be done about it, rather than look at the root cause. You're absolutely 100% correct. Now, to your point where you said that, in all the years that you've been around, you've never seen it this divided, et cetera. Let me explain what's going on. Well, first of all, racism is nothing new. It's always been here. And is it growing? Yes, it's growing, but it's not growing as rapidly as people seem to think it is. Yes, they see a lot of it. Okay, it's sort of like, let's say, like gay people, for example. Gay people have always been here. Okay, they've always been around.
Sure.
They were around when you were a kid, but you probably didn't see as many of them because it was not as accepted as it is today. People.
It wasn't accepted, and it wasn't necessarily publicized either. It wasn't
right. They called it in the closet. Okay, and now people can get married, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, whether we agree with it or not, it's more evident today. It doesn't mean that there's any more today than there was back then. It was just kind of hidden back then. That's all, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So this racism thing has always been around too, but it's more evident today because people are being more outspoken, et cetera. And yes, it is growing a little bit, but not by leaps and bounds like, the media would have you believe. But here's what's happening. I'm not sure how old you are, but like I said, I'll be 64 this month. And let me give you some statistics. And please, by all means, fact check me, because and all you got to do is go to uscensus.gov. The U.S. Census is taken every decade, every 10 years. And you can go on there and you can see every decade. and see what our demographics are in this country.
Sure.
When I was a child, the Black population in the U.S. was 12%. White people were around 86, 87%. Native Americans, 1%. Hispanic people, Latino people, almost 2%. Asians, almost 3%. Today, white people are about 59%, just under 60%. Okay? Native Americans remain at 1%. Black people remain at 12.9%. We've only grown, 9/10, which is almost 13%, right? Asians have almost doubled. They are almost at 5.9%, almost 6%. Latino, Hispanic people have more than quadrupled, 17 point something percent. So if you take just Black people at 12% and Latino, Hispanic people at 17%, that right there, let alone the Native Americans or Asians or whatever, that right there is 29% non-white. Okay, this is happening. I learned about this back in the early 1980s from the head of the American Nazi Party. He told me about this. I've been doing this for almost 40 years. All right. In the year 2042, it is well predicted. And again, you can look at the census and see where it's going. In the year 2042, which is only 2 decades from now, this country, for the first time, will be 50-50. 50% white, 50% non-white. By non-white, Black, Hispanic, Asian, Native American, other. Okay? And then between 2045 and 2050, it's going to shift. Whites, for the first time, will become the minority in this country. Now, globally, whites are already the minority, globally. But in certain countries, yes, they are the majority. This being one of them. Now, there is a large percentage of white people in our country who are okay with that. Hey, that's no big deal. That's evolution. That happens. No big deal.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. Right. Exactly. And then there are those, another large percentage, that are fearful about this. They think, if they become the minority, the people who were the minority are going to turn on them and punish them for all the atrocities and stuff. They're fearful. Okay, they're going into paranoid mode. And then what a lot of KKK and alt-right and neo-Nazis tell me, they say, Daryl, I don't want my grandkids to be brown. They call it the browning of America, or white genocide through miscegenation. So that's why they're jumping on this anti-immigration thing. But when these people say anti-immigration, it's a code word. It's not for everybody. They're not concerned about people who are here illegally from Canada or the UK or Eastern Europe. They're more concerned about people who are here from South America, Mexico, West Africa, things like that. Because if their kids were to marry one of those people, they would have brown grandchildren. But, if you marry somebody from Scotland or Wales or England, or Estonia or somewhere, your kid's going to be white. So so now they're concerned about that. We built this country. White people built this country. We wrote the Constitution, and now we're being squeezed out of our own, country. Well, no, it's not your own country. We all came here from somewhere, except for the Native Americans. So they're being fearful. And what's happened is this: when you sit on the throne of power for 400 years, I've been here for 400 years as a descendant of slaves. When you've been on the throne of power for 400 years, you don't want to get off. Okay? You look at our last president. He was only on the throne for 4 years, and he thinks he's still there. I mean, let me make another analogy. Okay, I'm a musician, right? So if I have a hit record, my record goes to number 1, I want to stay there. I don't want to see it fall down to number 2 and then become in the top 10. Now it's in the top 20, and now it's in the top 100, and then it falls off the charts. I want to stay there at number 1, Sure.
Self-preservation. I mean,
exactly.
That's also another human instinct in my personal experience, Daryl, I certainly do not believe that most of the people talking about, anti-immigration or anti-legal immigration are just concerned about, the browning of America or whatever, because that's not been my personal experience. I've never, felt that from my perspective. but I can understand how people would. I mean, I can understand that perspective, even though it's not my lived perspective.
Sure.
Again, and I talk on the podcast a lot about different mentalities and the way that people perceive things. And I'm not one that fears people who think differently than I do. Right. I'm also vehemently opposed to people who push a victimhood mentality. And I don't think that everybody is, anti-racist or whatever is doing that. But I do think that there are a lot of people out there that are.
You are 100% correct. I see them all the time. Yeah,
they push that victimhood mentality. They keep people in that victim mindset. And by keeping them in that victim mindset, they keep that person more oppressed than they ever would have been by the average white person.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
And those politicians that are out there constantly beating the drum of there's a racist in every closet and a misogynist under every bed, and there's there's out there somebody to put you back in chains or whatever, as our current president had once said. That does nothing to further the cause for people like you and I, who are actually trying to bring people together as opposed to pushing people apart. Now, Daryl, you and I could have conversations for hours and hours, and I hope that this is just the beginning of a long friendship between the two of us.
Absolutely, my friend.
Because I tell you what, I haven't done a lot of talking here, but I feel like my life is a lot better based on listening to you talk.
You know what? My life is a lot better based upon the fact that you've given me an opportunity to talk, and you're going to share it with your audience. Listen, let me tell you something. We are going to be around for decades. Whoever is in office, I don't care if it's Trump, I don't care if it's Biden, Obama, Clinton, whoever it is, or whoever it may be in 2024 or somebody else. All right?
Yep. We're
going to be around for decades. Those people are only going to be around for a minimum of 4 years or a maximum of 8 years. So let's not get all riled up about, these politicians. We can make a difference in our country. Our society, our country will only become one of two things. One, it'll become that which we sit back and watch it become, or two, it can become that which we stand up and make it become. So we have to ask ourselves the question, do we want to sit back and see what our country becomes, or do we want to stand up and make our country become what we want to see?
No, that's absolutely
We're going to be around for a long time.
Yep. And to that point, Daryl, that's the reason, we had you and I think kind of both alluded to it earlier in the conversation, but it's, when you talked about that top-down structure and how it doesn't work for everything, it will not work for this country to expect some politician. I don't care what party you affiliate yourself with or what politician is your favorite faux celebrity of the day or whatever the case may be. It's not the politicians, and it's certainly not the government that's going to save this country, Daryl. It's people like us doing what we do. It's having these conversations, eliminating that ignorance that people have that builds that fear. It's organizations like Braver Angels and FAIR, the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism.
On which I'm on the board of advisors for FAIR.
And that's one of the things one of the ways that I started following you. I had Angel Eduardo on the podcast back in...
Good friend of mine.
Yeah, episode 74. And I actually, I first heard about you when I talked to Jeff Scoop. Then I saw some tweets that Angel had done on some of the work that you had done. I became fascinated with you, and I wanted to talk to you because I think it is so important. The work that you're doing, like I said, there's going to be plenty of stuff that you and I disagree about, but it doesn't matter whether we disagree as long as that ignorance factor is taken away. And the same thing with all the people that I talk to. It's not about agreeing on everything. It's a matter of bringing people together because it's the people at ground level. It's us as individuals, our individuality, being accountable for ourselves, how we react to the situations that happen in our lives. There's so much in this conversation, Daryl, that has been so amazing. I can't thank you enough for the work that you've been doing and working with these organizations and, reaching out to like Angel talks about all the time, you can't think about these people as monsters
Right.
because everybody just wants to kill monsters. Just like your example, the snake in the classroom. They just want to kill the snake because they fear the snake. They're ignorant as to what the snake actually is.
Why don't we find out where the snake came from? Well, how did it get into the classroom?
Right.
Let's go to the root cause.
Yeah. No, this has been a fantastic.
I'll give you another quick example of something. Let's pinpoint the beginning of the civil rights movement. Let's just say 1955 with Rosa Parks and the bus boycott and Dr. King. All right. If you looked at those protests from 1955 through 1968 when King was assassinated, the powers that be, which is a polite way of saying the white power structure, when they looked at those protests, those marches, those demonstrations, those boycotts, what did they see? They saw an ocean of Black people with a smattering of white people mixed in. There have always been white people who have supported us and saw the vision and knew what was right and wanted to participate in progressing, okay? But there was an ocean of Black people. So the powers that be just kind of shut us down, plugged their ears and retarded our progress. Yes, we did make progress. The page turned, but it turned very slowly, all right? We did make strides, but very slowly. Now, that was yesteryear. Let's fast forward to last year or the year before last, after George Floyd, okay? What did the powers that be see then? They saw an ocean of Black people and an ocean of white people working together, marching together, okay? And the pages of progress turned a lot faster, all right? While those protests were predominantly geared towards police departments and things like that, and training and whatever else, there was a larger ripple effect that happened in this country. There was a lot of progress that we didn't even expect as a result of whites and Blacks working together. Police officers were being arrested and charged and convicted like that. 20 years ago, Derek Chauvin wouldn't even have been arrested or charged with what he did to George Floyd. That's progress. Food brands changing their labels, Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben. NASCAR banning the Confederate flag. NASCAR was ground zero for the Confederate flag. Names of buildings named after slave owners being changed. All these kind of things happen, boom, boom, boom. That's a result of people working together instead of working against each other. I spoke at the Women's March 2 years in a row, right down on the mall in Washington, D.C. by the monument. And I told them, I said, listen, what you're doing is a great thing, but you need to recruit more men into this movement because they need to see and understand what you're experiencing. Because when they understand it and they work together with the women, that's when things will change. Just like Blacks and whites, we all have to see what each other's problems are, and then we work together to solve them.
Sure.
So that's the key of working together, and that's what I try to explain to people on both sides, Black people, white people, whatever. I have my share of detractors. There are Black people who do not appreciate what I'm doing. There are whites who don't appreciate it either. I've been called every name of my own.
I was going to say, I think somebody called you recently
a white supremacist.
White supremacist, wasn't it? Yeah. Somebody from Antifa called you out as a white supremacist.
When you call me that battle is lost.
When I read that, yeah, I don't know. I thought it was funny. Well, it seems to be generally, I did a podcast a while back that said those who interject racism into everything are the real racists. And I truly believe that, because a lot of times I think that politicians know that being called a racist is so taboo, and people kind of like what you were talking about earlier, that paralysis by fear thing. Mm-hmm. They expect somebody to just go paralyzed and start shaking and sucking their thumb and fall down into the corner and start, in the fetal position once they're called a racist. So they figure that's the way that they're going to win that battle. They're going to call them a racist and whatever. But I always think it's funny, we saw Ben Carson called a white supremacist. I've Ben Carson, one of the most soft-spoken, one of the smartest men on the planet. He's done great things for humankind, but they called him a white supremacist because of the people he associated with, not because of anything that he's ever done. And I always find that fascinating, how people will try to use that kind of tactic as a battle weapon against somebody because they don't have anything stronger in their quiver. So they're going to try to use race, and to call a black man, especially a black man who's done so much for race relations, to call a black man a white supremacist. I damn near laughed myself out of my chair.
Yeah, again, that battle is over. I mean, if that's all you got, you need to stay home.
Exactly. Well, Daryl, I got to tell you, I can't tell you how much I appreciate
it's my pleasure,
you've given me today.
And thank you for giving me a chance, and please, thank you very much for giving my brother Jeff Scoop a chance to tell his story. That is very, very important, and he's a very, very important advocate of race relations, of bettering race relations here in our country.
He is, and I truly believe in redemption for radicals when they truly show it. When you can see, like in a guy like Jeff Scoop, when you can see in his heart of hearts, you can look at the panel of work that he's done since he left the movement. We got to give credit where credit is due. And I think it's just about us all working together.
Why are we out here fighting if we don't believe in change? And then when we see change, like somebody like Jeff Scoop, we deny it.
Right? No, you got to give credit where credit is due.
Absolutely,
you have
absolutely.
To. And that's why I continue to do what I do. I don't believe all hope is lost. I think there's room for us to work together. We're not gonna, there's gonna be plenty that we disagree on, but just like I heard you talking about in another talk, if we don't get out there and talk to our neighbors and try to change the hearts and the minds of those that are closest to us at ground level, we never got any hope of making this stuff work. We got to give credit where credit is due. We got to talk to our neighbors. We got to talk amongst, with people who have different opinions than us, different mindsets than us. And there's going to be things we never agree on, Daryl, but it doesn't matter. As long as we're not ignorant of different mindsets, different people, we can make this thing work. We can make it work, and we can all live better lives for it. That's what we're out here to do. Better the world one attitude at a time, man.
That's right. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it. I hope this will be part one of many.
I hope so too. Thank you very much, Daryl.
Thank you.
Friends, if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. Share it with your friends, share it far and wide. And of course, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe right from our website so you can get the Derate the Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. So this is Wilk wrapping up for the week, saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. If there is something that you would like to share with me, you can catch me on most social media platforms, or you can email me directly, wilk@wilksworld.com. With that, my friends, I am going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.